Welcome to tonight's On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers. Tonight's show is 2 hours long and live, so if you have any questions for my guests during the show, text them to 87778 with the word EDGE, a space, and then your name, location, and your message, and we'll try to pick up any that really hit the mark. They're all charged at standard rate, so why not get ready to text? Tonight's show features two people whose ideas for a new society were presented to the world in Peter Joseph's film Zeitgeist Addendum, a film which has been watched online by millions. He is trying to launch a zeitgeist movement to change people's perception of reality and consciousness. As part of that idea, he discovered and has incorporated the ideas of an extraordinary 93-year-old thinker who has created a strategy to build a new, unified, symbiotic world in harmony with nature. This project intends to achieve nothing less than the unification of the human race. It includes the design of new cities, the abolition of money, a new paradigm for living. It is called the Venus Project. I am enormously pleased to welcome two guests here on a lecture tour from their 21.5-acre research center located in Venus, Florida. They are founder of the Venus Project, Jacque Fresco, and Roxanne Meadows, who has been with the project for 33 years. What a show we've got tonight. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Theo. Nice to be here.
I'm glad you can make it. And Jacque, if I could start with you. I know you've been working on this for some time, but you are an extraordinary Renaissance man, aren't you? You've done lots of interesting things in your life.
That I don't know, but I've worked on a lot of things.
You've designed lots of different things.
Yes, I have.
And how did you come to conceive of a new society?
During the major depression in the States, there were people that bought new houses and new cars, and the banks failed.
You have to forgive me for asking, which depression, Jacque?
1930, 29.
That big one?
Yes.
Yeah, the Dust Bowl and all that.
That was the time when I saw 15 million people evicted from their homes because the banks failed. They couldn't pay them off. So they bought, before that they bought cars and all that, repossessed, and people moved out of their homes by the banks, and about 15 million was sleeping in every empty lot. I was just a kid then, 12, 13 years old, and I looked around at all these people. My dad was an agronomist, a sort of an agriculturist, and he was one of the first guys laid off, and he tried to get a job, but there was no openings, and he was evicted.
Where were you, Jacque?
Where?
Which
New York City.
Oh, you were in New York City?
Yes, in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And since people were sleeping in every lot, I looked around in stores and they had radios and vacuum cleaners, but people didn't have money. So what good is all that? It seemed to me that our nation was capable of producing all the goods and services and making it available to people, but the government did not. At that time, Roosevelt was in, while Hoover said, prosperity is right around the corner. But those are just words. I've learned then that politicians say things people like to hear. And if they're good at it, they can get elected. Theologians say things that people want to hear. They're there, everything's going to work out all right, don't worry about it, the Lord will provide. And that sort of thing is the dependency of people needing that kind of information. But I found out in reading scientific books and journals that scientists do not speak to win approval. If the majority of people believe the earth is flat, they come right out and they say, this is the evidence we have to prove it's round. Now, they don't say it's a little round and a little flat. Then you get along with everybody. It's not the business of science to get along.
So you've made it your business to change people's perception.
Try to. I don't know that I can do that.
Okay, but I'm interested in what made you suddenly go from being, say, a designer of helicopters or a consultant to the motion picture industry to basically creating a new world.
That's later. That was later on. But when I was a kid, the Depression forced people to ask new questions. How come there was a depression? How come the banks failed? They never asked those questions until the depression. And every university had students outside discussing communism, socialism, fascism. They were discussing things because conditions drove them to that. It isn't that people suddenly became intellectually bright. Conditions forced that. So I noticed that, so I listened to Nazis. They had the American flag and the swastika. During the Depression, they were talking about how great National Socialism was. Then I listened to socialists, and I asked questions. I said, how will you prevent corruption? They didn't have any answers. Then there was a guy speaking on communism, mankind united, all kinds of ideas, back to the good old days, people growing their own food. But I was standing in front of a communist, and he said, beat it, son. I was just a kid, because there are mostly adults around. I said, no, I want to hear what you've got to say. He said, why? I said, well, I don't believe what the Republicans say about the Democrats or what the Democrats say about the Republicans. I want to hear from a communist what communism is. He said, you can stay. So after about an hour, I said, I want to ask you 10,000 questions. He said, you'll have to go to the YCL. I said, what's that? He said, Young Communist League. I said, where are they? And he gave me an address, and I went there. And there were kids about 10 years old to 17, and they were reading Dostoevsky's book, such as Crime and Punishment, 10-year-olds. They were much brighter than the average child I've ever met. And I stayed there for about an hour. Then I asked the questions. How are you going to prevent corruption in the future? They said, well, when that time comes, we'll work on it. How are you going to house the masses? Well, we'll work on that when that time comes. I said, let's start a technical branch and work on those problems. So the lead guy said to me, you're deviating from the teachings of Marx. You'll have to leave. I said, I didn't come here to hurt anybody. I came here to help. I would help any group of people. So the vice president of the Young Communist League got up and said, let's hear him out. And they kicked us both out. So that was the end of my attempt to reach the communists.
Okay.
Then I...
Can I just interrupt there? Because those questions you just asked those communists, I'm going to ask you those same questions later with regard to your plans.
Of course.
A new society.
I want you to.
Good. That's both of us then. Okay, so carry on then.
Then I started, in attending religious sessions, the minister said how wonderful the divine plan was. God makes it rain to make the plants grow. So I raised my hand and I said, why does it rain at sea? So he said, hold your hands out, and he beat the daylights out of me. And I didn't understand him. I thought he was kind of stupid individual. He should have said, well, maybe I never thought of that. That's interesting. So I wanted answers. I don't want to follow anybody, and I don't want anybody to follow me. If what I say makes sense, do it. If it doesn't, get off. To build a following where people admire you and walk around, that's dangerous.
Okay.
So I don't want to lead anybody. I just want to point out things, such as when World War II came about, being a kid, I just noticed that they were bombing the hell out of each other. Germany was bombing England and France, and U.S. sent Lindbergh to Germany to see what was happening. And he came back and said, the Germans are turning out 3,000 planes a month. And U.S. had 600 first-class fighting aircraft. And that was not enough to engage. So they asked the aircraft companies to expand. They said, hell no. After the war, we're stuck with a big plan. So they gave the aircraft companies the money to expand. America supported 60% of American industry, build it up. And after the war, they gave it back to them for 1 cent to 3 cents on the dollar. That's public funds. They didn't give the public interest in that. And it looked to me very strange. Mm-hmm. And this is what was strange about it. If they conscripted the lives of young men, put them up to defend the country, I felt at that time that they should have conscripted all the war industries so nobody makes a buck out of war. If you make money out of war, you sell submarines, airplanes for $40,000. Today it's $1 million for airplanes. People make a lot of money from war. And I thought that was unfair. If millions of young Americans put their lives up to defend the country, they used to say on television, buy war bonds, that'll bring Johnny home faster. So they should have conscripted all the banks, all the money to bring Johnny home. And I didn't understand how you can make a profit during the war. So I'd like to see all the war industries put on the same basis of pay as the soldiers. The soldiers at that time were men who enlisted for the adventure. I asked thousands of soldiers during basic training when I was drafted, what are you fighting for? What did you know what you... No, they didn't know. Really, they didn't know. And World War I, they had an IQ of 11-year-old. So soldiers never knew what they were fighting for. It's just the medals and the adventure they went into the war for. But I asked thousands of soldiers, what are you fighting for? To see what they knew.
Did you
fight? They didn't know a damn thing.
Jacque, did you fight?
No, I was sent to Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, for ideas and invention.
Okay.
The aircraft industry. So they said to me, first thing, said, can you make a bomb that moves sideways? I said, no, I can only design safety devices. I don't know how to do that. I know how to do that, but I won't. Do you understand that?
I do understand, yeah. You were a sort of conscientious objector, a subtle conscientious objector, were you?
Well, no, I couldn't do that because that would put me in prison and get me in trouble. I wanted to get my ideas out in the Army. Okay. So I told the Army men, the top brass, that I was surrounded by, such as a major. I said, I think the war is wrong. And he said to me, you better be good, what you say. I said, you got to give me at least 20 minutes. Will you do that? He agreed. I said, don't judge me till I finish.
Okay.
Now, I had a friend that was in World War I. His name was Forrest
Gump?
Forrest Weissong.
Sure.
And he used to fly military planes in World War I. Okay. And he told me he flew over German munition dumps with orders not to bomb it. He said he flew over 8 times. Now, he couldn't understand why he shouldn't bomb it. After the war, there was a book called Arms and the Men. I want you to remember that. That book shows how DuPont...
Is that Ernest Hemingway?
Arms and the Men.
Wasn't it?
DuPont had holdings in I.J. Farben. That's who he's ordered not to bomb it. Now, that's dirty.
Yeah.
Fortune magazine ran Arms and the Men years ago, showing how different nations had investments in other nations, and so they manipulated things so you didn't. And I thought that was corrupt. That was not good. The war was dirty. Then in World War II, we were taking all the islands in the South Pacific, shooting Japanese, and telling the natives, they're coming to take your island away. And they showed the natives how to use guns. They didn't care about the lives of people. They cared about defending their particular institution. So I went along with a guy named Alexander P.D. Seversky, who owned Seversky Aircraft Factory. He said, we shouldn't build pursuit planes, and we shouldn't take the islands in the South Pacific. So I said, what should we do? He said, well, we should build long-range bombers and knock out the power projects in Germany. That'll stop the aircraft factories and everything else. Don't shoot soldiers in the field. He said, that does nothing. If you don't bomb the power projects and shut down the munition factories, you can keep sending airplanes and other things over. But there's no money in that, shutting down the factories. And there's more money in ordering new airplanes. You understand what I mean?
I do understand
So the
what you
war
mean.
looked bad, and President Johnson even, at that time,